going to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Coming at you on a Thursday night, a little bit later than we thought we were going to be able to get on here, but some shifting schedules and everything like that. But we are ready to go here for tonight's edition. And we are getting into the linebackers. That was the group that is up next for us. And it's one of the groups that's probably the most interesting on this team for this season because there is some talent in the room. But there is not nearly as much depth in the room, I think, as we thought there was going to be coming into the season, coming out of the spring, rather. And so Carolina, they are in an interesting spot when it comes to this position group. We'll break that entire room down for you guys tonight. And then also we'll give you our takeaways from the first edition of the Come Up, which is what appears to be the docuseries for Carolina football this year. I know that they had said that there is an agreement with Hulu. I am not sure whether or not that is actually the truth or if that, in fact, fell through too. And this is what we're getting for this year. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the night. But let's start with the linebackers for this season. And boy, when you start with the linebackers for this year, it really starts with one man. And that is Boise State transfer linebacker Andrew Simpson. This linebacking core really needed a guy in the middle after Amari Campbell left, and this is the guy that they end up going out and getting. Simpson, a guy that, of course, transferring in from Boise State, was a guy that played in the college football playoff last year. So far in his career, he's seen action in 40 games, including 25 starts. This past year as a junior, finished with 45 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 24 quarterback pressures, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. Not bad numbers by any stretch of the imagination. The total tackles seem a little bit low, especially for a guy that played pretty much the entire year. But still, that's respectable enough, especially with the tackles for loss and sack numbers. The thing is, the year prior, which was his breakout season, he had 66 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 33 quarterback pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions. Numbers that, by the way, were very similar to the numbers that were put up last year by Amari Campbell. So biggest thing for him, I think Carolina is getting a leader in this room. They're getting someone that's been there, that's done that. Even though it was at the group of 5 level, you can't really get much better than coming from Boise State, a spot that has recruited incredibly well, really runs their operation like a power conference program. The thing is, though, you're hoping he sort of turns the clock back just a little bit to 2023 as opposed to what he did last year and can improve upon those numbers.
Yeah, in terms of production, you value the 23 production over what he did in 24. I don't think you can underestimate the leadership that he'll bring to that position group, the defense, and really that locker room overall. Because when you look at it from a winning perspective, this guy's a winner. Like, he knows how to win. He knows what it takes to get to the college ball playoff and compete at the highest level of the sport. There aren't many guys on this roster that can say that, and so I think there's a lot to like about him. I think when you look at this group and it's headlined by 2 transfers, I think we'd feel a lot better if Amari Campbell was still here, because you would have 3 legitimate guys, which means you would have a little bit more depth in the room. But this is a guy that I think is poised to be a difference maker from day one. And I think he's one of the first guys we talked about the other night, where I think we feel a lot better about the back 7 than we do the front 4 going into the season. We got to see how it all plays out. And he's one of the reasons why, because you've seen him in big moments. You've seen him make plays that impact winning. I think there was a big reason why Belichick, Michael Lombardi, targeted him in the transfer portal. Was, yes, he's a good football player, obviously fits what they want to do defensively, but also is a winner and will bring that mindset, that mentality that they're trying to overhaul and change in a very quick manner. So one of the more exciting transfers Carolina got later in the transfer window, and I think he, right up there with Thad Dixon, is poised to be the face of a defense that's going to look completely new under Steve and Bill Belichick.
Yeah, and I think, the elements of his game, I think you really like. You like the downhill ability. I think that he is a guy that loves to penetrate and get into the backfield, make plays consistently back there. One thing that I think you do want to see him get a little bit better at is the missed tackles. Now, he did drastically improve this past year, because the one thing that he struggled with back in 2023 was he would be in the backfield. He just would miss a lot of tackles. 22 missed tackles back in 2023. This past year, just 12. So, yes, he played less snaps, played 506 in 2024 as opposed to 732 in 2023. But I do think that you like that ability, that you're hoping that that's something that he's been able to clean up. And then I like him in coverage. I mean, I've seen some of the reps of him in coverage. He had 2 interceptions back in 2023, as I mentioned, 1 interception last year. So he's a guy that can do some things in coverage for you. He only allowed 1 touchdown, has only allowed 1 touchdown so far in his career. And you go back to his best season in that 2023 year, his the quarterback rating against him was a 50.9. You go to last year, little more success, 84.4, but that's still really good for a linebacker, considering that those guys are usually going to get targeted a decent amount of times. That was the one thing that I think we've seen with Carolina's linebackers over the last few years. You've had moments where guys have looked good in coverage, a la Cedric Gray, but they've also been picked on a little bit in coverage. I think that Andrew Simpson is the type of guy that can probably hold his own in coverage. The biggest thing is he just has to make sure that he's sure-handed with his tackles.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a welcomed, change to the way Carolina is able to play defense in the passing game, because, man, we saw it under all 3 defensive coordinators under Mac Brown. They put linebackers in conflict because they couldn't pass, or they couldn't hold up in pass coverage. And you saw a lot of times they were, trying to, cover crossing routes where they just could not hold their own. And a lot of big plays happened over the middle of the field attacking that linebacker spot. I think with the missed tackles, I think that's where the Belichick effect, I think, is really going to be the most noticeable, because something we talked about a lot during, and it was really under Gene Chizik and a little bit with Jeff Collins where the defense fell apart, was, for the most part, they did a really good job of putting their guys in position to make plays. They just didn't make plays. On the flip side, though, there was no accountability. If they missed tackles, they just got put back on the field and were allowed to keep missing tackles. That ain't going to be the same case anymore. So when they're put in a position to make a play and they don't make a play, there's going to be there's going to be repercussions for that. So I expect him to take another step forward to limit the missed tackles, and if that's the case, it'll go a long way for this defense. I think taking the step forward that it has to play, or that it has to take, because we talk about it every year how bad tackling is, at the college level. But I think a difference is that this has been a much more physical camp. They're not kind of easing into it the way that they have under Mac Brown. This team will be ready to go, I think, from a physicality standpoint when we get to that TCU game, and you hope that translates onto the field, and then not missing tackles left and right.
Yeah, and I think for him, the fact that he took a step in the right direction last year, became a little more polished, I think is certainly an encouraging sign. And I think he's going to know that that's an area of his game that has to be cleaned up if he's going to be out there under Belichick. Because as you said, doesn't matter if the guys are not necessarily as talented. If they are doing the fundamental things that they need to do, he will put them on the field over certain guys. So as good as Andrew Simpson is, and I think he's going to have a really strong season, I think it's going to be right up there with what Amari Campbell could have done for this team this year. I think it's totally possible that, hey, man, if you're going through a point in the season where you're struggling and you're not really handling your own out there, you're allowing guys to shed tackles like the way that he did back in 2023, then Bill Belichick is going to say, hey, we're going to take you off the field. You need to get that cleaned up. But I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be pushing to potentially be an all-ACC caliber linebacker. I just love the way that he plays. Ton of physicality to his game, can cover sideline to sideline if he needs to, has the speed, but also brings the power. So I really like everything about his game and think he has a chance to be a really great player. Another guy that I think is in a similar ilk in terms of being a great player, or possibly being a great player, is Kamori House. Now, to me, I don't think this one is nearly as guaranteed. You look back at last year, played in all 12 regular season games for Washington, did start 5 games, finished the season with 35 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 0 sacks, 8 quarterback pressures, an interception, and 4 passes defensed in 317 snaps. So once again, not a full-time starter. We saw this a lot with the defensive line. So you're asking him to become a full-time starter for you. But I do think that there is a guy that we'll talk about here in a second in Mekhi Bayor that's in the room as well. That's going to take, I think, some of the pressure off of Kamori House. I think this is one of those guys, though, that you look at him, you look at how he's built. This is a hybrid safety that is playing linebacker for Carolina. So we've talked about wanting to be better with defending in the middle of the field. These matchups that Carolina gets put in where you're matching up a linebacker with a tight end and it doesn't necessarily work. It leads to these big performances from tight ends. We've seen that over the last few years. I don't think you necessarily have to worry about it nearly as much this year, because I think you see it with Andrew Simpson being a good coverage guy. That's exactly what Kamori House is. Biggest question for him is he going to be able to handle the physicality of being an in-the-box linebacker at the size that he is?
Yeah, I think the initial excitement around him is the fact that he's comfortable in this scheme because he's played in it, is going to know his role, knows what's being asked of him. And, I think it was probably communicated to him upon transferring over. We got to get your body in a much better position, much better shape than it was a year ago at Washington. I was listening to some of the stuff Inside Carolina was doing about some training camp. And one of the things that they said that's noticeable is that this team looks bigger, faster. They look stronger. They look the part when they get off the bus. They'll look like a team that's ready to go play and compete at a high level. I think this is a guy that probably is one of the guys that they didn't name the names of, but has maybe transformed his body in a way that we did not see at Washington, because that's what's going to be demanded when you're making the transition from role player to starter and a guy that's going to be on the field. You'd imagine, 85, 90% of the defensive snaps from game to game, week to week throughout the entire of the season. His ability to be a quality defender in coverage is the greatest attribute that he has. I don't think that was an accident. I think that was something that Belichick identified when he got here of what needed to improve for Carolina defensively. It was to have guys and that linebacker spot that could do their own and pass cover just the way that they get put in conflict now in this open spread era offense of college football. Does he have to become better in the run game, able to hold up? I think absolutely. But if he can be a guy that can hold his own when he gets, matched up across the middle of the field, get some of those tight ends that he'll have to face against every week, I think that'll go a long way. And that'll be a welcome change for Carolina because quite simply, they haven't been very good in that department. So he's not as complete a player as Andrew Simpson was and is. I think those two combined, though, really have this linebacker room in as good a spot as I think you could have hoped for it to be, losing Power Echols, losing Amari Campbell to the transfer portal. So we'll have to see how this unit all plays out. But I think this unit is poised to take a step in the right direction and the position be talked about in a much better way, because to hear people talk about Carolina's linebackers last handful of years, they wouldn't think that these guys were good football players because they were on a bad defense. No, Carolina had great linebackers just on a bad defense.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was because their front four couldn't get off blocks. Their front four was getting pushed into them, in the run game, and they couldn't open pass protection. But those guys are really good football players. Amari Campbell, I think, is going to be a star in the Big Ten, and be interested to see the narrative that exists around him. I think Carolina's got two really good linebackers that'll be talked about in a different way, because I think Carolina's defense is poised to be better than it's been the last handful of years.
Yeah, I don't know if the guys that are going to be out there this year are necessarily going to be as good of linebackers as the ones that we had the last few years. The thing is that when you look back at the linebackers from the last few years, look at how much was on their plate, because the defensive backs were not strong enough to be able to really help them out, especially the safeties. So the middle of the field was just a complete disaster. It was up to them to basically take care of the middle of the field in the passing game. Then in the running game, ton on your plate because the defensive line is not getting home. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. So it's on you guys to not only help in the run game, but also you were a part of the group that was able to get pressure on the quarterback. Go back to last year. Who was the guy that led the team in sacks for Carolina a year ago? That would be Amari Campbell. Just can't happen. So I think you're hoping that this year's group isn't going to need that much responsibility because the defensive line is going to be better. I don't know if that is necessarily going to be the case, but who knows? I mean, maybe these linebackers are being talked about in that same light as the previous linebackers. I hope they're not, but I hope it's because they don't need to do nearly as much as they've had to do in years past. When it comes to Kamori House specifically, the one thing that I do like about him is that you mentioned that he was a part of this system back at Washington. He seems to be a guy that is taking a little bit of a leadership role, even as a young guy. That's one of the things that I've heard coming out of camp, is that he's been a guy that's really standing out as a leader, really is demanding a lot from certain players. I think this is one of those guys that because he was in the system last year, he played as much as he did. He feels like he needs to have a voice in that room. And so, yeah, I'm a little worried at 6 foot, 215 pounds, although, he is, at 6 foot, 215, it's a little bit different than being 6'3", 215. Your body is a little bit wider because that's how you're packing the weight on. So I think this could still work for him this year. I just want to see how good of a run defender is he, because I feel like he's more of that guy that's going to be a strength for you in coverage, but might be exposed at times when some of these offensive linemen are able to climb to the second level. Is he able to get off blocks consistently and make tackles? Then you've got Mekhi Bayor. Now, this is a guy that's got a lot of experience. I don't think it's crazy to say that this is going to be a guy that's probably going to play a lot for Carolina too. I think they will rotate 3 linebackers, which is different from what they've done the last few years. You look at Mekhi Bayor these last few years. He's spent the last 4 years at Nebraska, then transferred in the offseason to Missouri, ends up transferring again, and now is with Carolina. you look at the action that he saw in 2023, finished with 24 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and half a sack in 242 defensive snaps and 152 special team snaps. That was back in 2023. This past season, he played in 12 of the team's 13 games, collecting 49 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 3 passes defense, and 2 fumble recoveries in 375 defensive snaps and 130 special team snaps. So not a guy that's been a full-time starter, very comparable to what we're seeing from a lot of these guys in this room and comparable to what we saw from Kamori House. But I think the fact that he has been around for a while, he's been a part of a Big Ten defense. I get it. Nebraska, certainly not the best defense in the Big Ten, but not really that bad. Their biggest issue has been their offense has never really been that good, really since Bo Pelini left. And so I think this is a guy that could really help Carolina in the middle of that defense. I think he can rotate in at either spot, either that middle linebacker spot or that weak side linebacker spot. And I think he really does bring a lot to the table. I mean, this was a guy also that some people were looking at as an edge rusher, so he might be able to get after the quarterback just a little bit for you as well.
Yeah, I think you like the versatility, the flexibility to use him at 2 different linebacker spots, and maybe he's a guy that with his ability to get after the quarterback is someone that Steve Belichick uses as a blitzer, as a different body to get after the quarterback. I think you like the fact that he's coming from Nebraska, so has experience playing at the power conference level and the conference that just produced back-to-back national champions. And I think the biggest thing that you mentioned when you were setting, the table for him is the rotation. And, while you look at him and Kamori House, maybe they're not full-time starters, but maybe they're not going to be asked to be, because there's going to be legitimate rotation for them on the field, which I think is going to be a welcome sight to Carolina fans. Just because we know how, especially with the offenses you face, with the amount of plays you play, it's easy to get worn down. And so I think while, yes, you would have maybe loved to put guys in that have all this full-time starting experience, there's nothing wrong with adding guys that are going to play 300, 400 snaps, because that's probably what the game plan is going to be for them going into the season anyway. And so I think between him and House, they kind of really balance each other out. And then you have Simpson there, so you've got a really good, top 3 at the linebacker spot. That, as I mentioned, is the room as good as it's been in the past couple years? I don't know, but it's in as good of a spot as it could have been especially once you lost Campbell to the transfer portal. So really excited to see how these guys are going to be used, because I think they're going to be better coached. They're going to be better with their fundamentals, better with their technique. And I think, the 3 of them really give this back 7 a chance to be the strength of the defense, which is something we have not said in quite some time in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I really do think that this is a good 3-man linebacker rotation. And that's the thing, is that it is going to be more of a rotation this year. We've been asking for that for years, because one of the things about the linebacking core is that it's always been really good to start the year. And then as the year goes along, they seem to wear down, because there is so much responsibility that has been on their plate, and there's nobody that can rotate in to actually help them. So I think this is a group that you feel pretty good about. Now, the thing is that behind them, you don't really have anybody else that you can trust just yet. Now, are there guys that I think have potential? Certainly. I do think that there are guys that you look at and you think can turn into some players back here, but really it is this trio that is going to have to carry Carolina early in the season. And you're hoping that after that, some other guys really do start to emerge. I think that this is a linebacking core that when we come back and talk about them at the end of the season, we will, and I do my position grades for the year, we will look on this group pretty fondly, and we will say this is a group that had a lot of success for Carolina, I think Kamori House could grow into a star. I think maybe early in the season you'll see more of Bayor out of the gate so they can sort of ease House into it. But I think once you get to the end of the season, House will be a guy that we will be talking about right up there with Andrew Simpson. And like I said with Simpson, I believe that he's a guy that has a shot to make an all-ACC team at the end of the year. I know that for some people that might not be enough. Maybe you're expecting more out of him. But I'm telling you, this is a guy that's good, but I don't think he's necessarily as good as, let's say, Amari Campbell was, who I don't even know if he's going to be an All-American type of player. But I do think that, he was a guy that had probably a little bit of a higher ceiling. Simpson, really high floor, though, and I think has a chance for a big year. Now we go to the rest of the guys in the room. And so who is the next guy that can emerge? I think the guy that everybody's looking at and they're trying to really figure out is Gregory Smith, who transferred from Florida. Gregory Smith III, he's a hybrid safety / linebacker. And this one, it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, to figure out where exactly he's going to stick. Because when the initial position rooms came out, he was a guy that was listed with the linebackers. Now you look at him, he's a guy that's listed with the defensive backs. And so you've got to figure out, okay, where exactly is he going to fit for Carolina? You look back at his time at Florida, and he was a guy that played, relatively sparingly this past year, played in 5 games for the Gators, and didn't really do a whole lot for them, but was a safety. He in 5 games logged 100 snaps, registered 5 total tackles, and had 1 pass defense. Prior to that, in his final season at the high school level, he had 29 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, an interception, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So this is a guy that can play really anywhere. I think because of the lack of depth that they have at linebacker and the lack of proven guys that they have there, his best avenue to playing will probably be at the linebacker spot. But there is one thing about him. He is 6'3". Some people have him listed at 6'4", and he's 211 pounds. So this is an incredibly thin player. Figuring out if he's going to be able to hold up, if he's going to be able to get off of blocks and make plays in the run game, I think is what is going to be the difference in figuring out whether or not he's going to play linebacker or play safety.
Yeah, I think this could be someone we're talking about this year as a linebacker, stays with the program, maybe next year transitions back to safety if they have more depth in that position group. Nonetheless, he's got to get bigger if he's going to play linebacker full time at the college level. 211 pounds is it's small, especially with some of the programs that Carolina will face. That's a guy that could get worn down. So I think you like the versatility, you like what he can do, what he can be. But if this is why we talk about this position group needing to stay healthy, because if the initial wave of guys don't hold up, if there's injuries there, and this is someone that I think you have to count on more than what we're talking about right now, that does not spell good things for Carolina's defense in 2025, no matter how much of a defensive wizard Bill Belichick and his son may be. So I like them targeting guys that have played the safety position that they want to move to linebacker. I don't think it's an accident that they've brought in multiple guys that can do that. With that being said, if they're going to play linebacker, they've got to get their bodies to a point to hold up. If they're going to be difference makers in the run game, and that's going to be something that I think if he stays within the program going into next year, that'll be something that he takes a big step forward, is getting that body ready to hold up, playing up front, 12 games, so he can be a guy that, when he's if he's on field and rundowns, isn't getting picked on and getting bullied.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for him was that he was a guy that was a part of the spring portal group. If he was a guy that was part of the fall group, he probably ends up playing a little bit more for Carolina at whatever position they're ultimately going to play him at. I think he's probably going to end up at safety, but if he does end up at linebacker, I think he's a guy that coming from Florida has enough talent to be able to do something for Carolina, which I think is what they're looking for from the rest of the guys in that room. The other guy that I think has a chance this year to probably factor in is Evan Bennett, who is a holdover from last year's squad. I think with him, it's just the fact that he has been with the team this entire summer, or even going back into the spring. And I think, the other thing with him is that, now that he's, been in college for a year, he was with Carolina last year. I think he's probably got his body a little bit more positioned to be able to contribute this year. I like him as a guy that can help in the run game. I think he certainly has that ability. That was one of the things that I liked about him coming out of high school. But the thing is, for him, he's going to have to probably get a little bit better in coverage. There are some other things that he's going to have to shore up, but this is probably the guy, even maybe over Gregory Smith. This is probably the guy that I think has the best chance to add himself to that linebacker rotation. But I don't know if coming out of the gate to start the season, he's going to be one of those guys.
Yeah, I would probably say not, but maybe the more he plays, gets comfortable in the system, can prove that he can hold up in pass coverage, I do think there could be a larger role for him, because I do think that it's going to be intentional that they're rotating guys in and out. And maybe because when we talked about this position group, and we talk about how this guy is good in one area but deficient in the other, and then the next guy is kind of flip-flop, there could be some mix matching that Carolina does with their linebackers to try to maximize their strengths but really minimize and hide the weaknesses. And so if this is a guy that can hold up better in the run game than, let's say Kamori House, maybe, in obvious rundown situations, Carolina subs him in, and then he is on the field and makes a play or two in the run game. When it's a passing, if it's an obvious passing down, obviously you're not going to see this guy on the field. So I think you like the fact that he's, been with the program. I think kind of knows the culture, knows, his way around Chapel Hill. I think made an obvious retention for Bill Belichick, for just to keep someone there for some familiarity in that linebacker room that got overhauled, as you mentioned, with 4 transfers. And I do think there is a scenario where when we get maybe post Clemson and we're going down the back half of the season, that maybe he has a much bigger role than we anticipated. And I think that'll be a good thing, because Carolina's going to need more than just Simpson and House to produce at this linebacker spot. They're going to need, I would say, consistent production from at least 3 to 4 guys to really maximize that room this year.
Well, the other thing about this linebacking core is when you look at the last few years, with as much as they played these guys, Carolina had really, really good injury luck. If for some reason something is to happen to that linebacking core this year, and you lose one guy, all of a sudden you're looking at a pretty bleak situation for Carolina, especially depending on who that guy is. And so you just need somebody else to step up. Maybe it is Evan Bennett that is the guy that ends up stepping up. I think for him, he was a guy that played at a pretty low level of high school football in the state of Georgia. That year, getting acclimated to the college game, I think that might pay off for him. And he's a guy that provides a little bit of versatility. So I think he could be a guy that could factor in at either spot for Carolina if he can get himself up to speed with this new system, if he can prove to the staff. I mean, it's at 6'2", 230 pounds. I think he's where he needs to be weight-wise. I think his body's built where it needs to be. It's just about proving that he is talented enough to be able to get the job done and for them to put him on the field. Now, other guys that could factor in here are 2 guys that transferred in during the summer. That is Oklahoma State transfer Jonathan Agamadu and Florida State transfer Tamir Hickman-Collins. Now, the thing is, I have noticed one guy that has been on a lot of the videos that they have put up and a lot of the photographs that they have put up of the team is Hickman-Collins. Now, I don't know if that means that he is a guy that's seeing some decent reps. He could be a guy that is playing a little bit for Carolina. The thing for him is that for Florida State, he was kind of a reach. It was an odd fit for him coming out of the state of South Carolina. He was a guy that, I'm shocked Carolina didn't give more consideration to, considering that he was out of Indian Land High School, which is right outside of the Charlotte area. But this is a guy that we had not heard anything about. He goes to Florida State, which as a low-end 3-star was pretty interesting. And now, he gets his opportunity at Carolina. Maybe this is a guy that can break through. Agamadu, the interesting thing about him is he's a guy that was an edge rusher coming out of high school. Now he's making the transition to linebacker. He was there at Oklahoma State playing linebacker back in the spring. And we'll see if that transition continues to work here. So 2 more interesting names to keep an eye on, along with the true freshmen in this room. All 3 of these guys joined the team in the summer. That would be Tyler Hauser, Jake Bauer, and Lance Pascal. Me being a guy that is a huge fan of Tyler Hauser, I think he's the one guy, if you're looking for someone out of that freshman group to really step up, I think that's your guy right there. I thought, when I watched him, high motor guy, big hits, does a good job of reading the offense and reacting, rarely guesses. So certainly a guy that just read and reacts, does everything that you need to do. A little young, but I do think that he is a guy that played at Pope John the 12th, which is a school in New Jersey, one of the better schools in the state of New Jersey. And this past year, had 144 total tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 1 interception, and helped lead his team to a state title. So he is, I think, the best chance that Carolina has of getting someone that's a true freshman in there. And with some of the unknowns, I don't think it's the craziest thing to think we could see him out here at some point during the season playing a little bit for Carolina, especially as the year wears on and he gets to, the chance to prove himself a little bit more.
Yeah, and maybe he's a player that you identify that if Carolina takes care of business the way they should against, Charlotte, Richmond, you get him on the field, get him some experience, get him acclimated to the college game, can really maybe carve out a role as the season moves along. The 2 transfers, you got to like the fact that they're coming from the power conference level. So, and the kid from Florida State, although being a low-end 3-star, maybe going to Florida State was a big step up. I think maybe makes a better transition, coming to play at Carolina. Regardless, I think you're hoping and looking at maybe these 5 guys, particularly the 3 freshmen, this could be the potential foundation of this position group moving forward, assuming that Belichick and his son stay here for the next 3 to 4 years. So, I think you got to like the fact that you've got really a handful of young guys that you could kind of grow, teach, and develop them in the system. And maybe whether it's in 26 or maybe 27, these are the faces of that linebacker room. And where these are guys that I think we're talking about in a big way. I expect that to be for Hauser. I think this will be a guy that next year, assuming he's still in Chapel Hill, we'll be talking about in a much bigger capacity. So I think you really got to like with what they did with this room, considering where it was when they inherited it, what happened in the spring when you lost Amari Campbell off to Penn State. You've got a nice, blend of experience, winning pedigree with Simpson, with a guy like, House that from Washington that has time in the system, with a bunch of other guys that, are poised and have the potential to really become impactful players for Carolina's defense for years to come. And we've seen it throughout the kind of the history of this program. When Carolina's defense is, playing at a high level, it's always been anchored by good linebacker play. And yes, you got to have help by your front 4. You need to have your secondary to make you look better. But I do think, really since the first time since Butch Davis built this position group up in the late 2000s, this could be a position group over the next 3 to 5 years. We could talk about becoming the strength of this defense with what with what they've done to this room and kind of what you expect to see from a Belichick-led defense, which you knew from his time in New England, always had great linebacker play. I think that's the expectation if he is going to be on the sidelines in Chapel Hill for many years to come.
Yeah, and the one thing that I think you brought up there that we have to give them a lot of credit for is that this group did an unbelievable job of scrambling when they lost Amari Campbell, because it would have been easy for them to just say, well, this is what we got to deal with. We've got, Bayor in here. They had brought him in the spring transfer portal window. I think that was before Amari Campbell had announced that he was leaving. And then, we're just roll with him in-house. And that's what we've got. Two guys that haven't been full-time starters, hopefully very similar to what we're doing with the defensive line. We're going to bank on that. And instead, they go out, they get aggressive, and they go out and get one of the best linebackers in the portal. And I think it's the most important pickup for this roster. Don't get it wrong. I think, especially with how thin they got at defensive tackle, they needed a guy like DeAndre Robinson to come in there. There's no doubt about that. But to me, this was the biggest pickup that Carolina made. If they don't have Andrew Simpson, I really don't know how good this team actually is this year. I think with him in there, now you can believe that you've got a good enough linebacker in the middle that Carolina can be a pretty solid defense and a pretty solid back six, back seven. I think that's what you're really hoping this year we see from Carolina. And I think now it is possible that happens. I think these guys will be put in a really good spot to succeed because of this system that Steven Belichick runs. We saw the success that some of the linebackers last year, like Kamori House, had, even in limited snaps for him as a part of that Washington defense last year. So I expect this linebacking core to be pretty damn good this year for Carolina. So that's your look at the linebackers for this year. Now let's talk about the come up. That is the name of the docuseries that Carolina released earlier this week on their social media channels, basically detailing what's been going on during the offseason. It started with a look at ACC kickoff, a little bit of insight into some of the guys that were at ACC kickoff, and then sort of transition to what Carolina is doing right now. They showed us the nutritional side of things. I think we both thought one thing that stood out was that, this was not really the most thrilling episode that you're ever going to see. We would like more clips of these guys in practice. I don't know if they're going to give us that. I mean, hell, they are not giving the media really any looks at this team. The other day, they gave them a 10 to 15-minute window, and basically the media got to watch the guys warm up. That was pretty much all they got to do. So they are trying to keep things basically as secretive as possible. Maybe once we get into the year, we'll get a little more insight into what's going on. But it feels like, it's interesting because it's a look inside the program. We get a look at some of the personalities that Carolina has on this roster. But at the same time, I'm with you. It wasn't exactly the most thrilling edition that you're going to watch.
It was pretty boring, but I guess that's what you expect with Belichick, his girlfriend being involved. They're going to give us just enough to probably make us sit there and watch it for 30 minutes, and then come away saying, "Damn, I wish I would have seen a lot more than what I got to see." The two things I really took away: one, there's a leadership role that Will Hardy has taken with this team that I think it's been fun. It's been fun to, I guess, watch from the outside looking in, kind of follow. And really, we'll talk about him when we do the defensive back previews later this week. I'm really excited just for him because this is a kid that, has been here for, quite some time. I think he embodies what we want a Carolina football player to be on and off the field. I think he, as much as anybody on the defensive side of the football on the roster, really is, not to say burdened, but is very passionate about keeping the life and legacy of Tylee Kraft alive. So that was really cool, really nice to see. And not that the program's forgotten about him, but it just felt like when they did the lifting session, he made sure to really mention him in a way that was very heartwarming. And then from an on-field perspective, I talked about this a little bit earlier. there was an overhaul to the way Carolina is feeding their football players. And if you kind of read in between the lines and the messaging, you can basically tell from Belichick's perspective, he felt like these players were being put at disservice the way that they were being fed and what the previous staff was doing to get their bodies in the best position possible to win football games on Saturdays. And so that's been, overhauled probably even more than it always gets overhauled when a new coach comes in, but it feels like it's even more doubled down where like that's a real big emphasis on kind of what they do off the field and something that gets stressed to them whenever they're in a team meeting situation. So, and also thought I did appreciate getting to hear Belichick message to the team where he was talking about the importance of practice. It's kind of a little Dean Smith-esque where, in his mind, like, yeah, the games are what count. Practice is where the games are won and lost, though. Yeah. And I think, and that's going to be the mentality shift, the mindset difference. I referenced, I think, when we did the podcast earlier this week, when we had Brent Renner on the station, that he's like, when he went to practice, he said you could feel it. That it wasn't a normal what you typically see at college. It was very organized, professional. It was very quick, fast-paced. Everybody was locked in, and that's what you expect with Belichick. It was nice to kind of hear that be communicated and then let it be receptive. So I'm interested to see kind of what happens in episode 2. Hopefully we get a little bit more from practice and everything like that. But, for someone that's been damn near begging for access, it's hard to come on here and complain about the lack of access we got when we finally got some after an offseason full of expectation and anticipation.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really stuck with me was the speech that he made about practice, which you brought up. I think that under previous leadership, practice was not seen as important. You saw a lot of thud. You did not tackle a lot during the week, and that led to mistakes on the field. And I don't think that's going to be the case with Bill Belichick and his staff. They value practice. That is where the game is won and lost. Practice should be the most difficult thing that you do every week. When you step onto that field, you should feel like you're prepared. And it felt like so many times when Carolina was double-digit favorites, when Carolina was expected to win games at home, on the road, with a significant number beside their name, Carolina would come away the loser of that game. And in certain times, Carolina would be embarrassed because they simply did not look prepared under Mac Brown. And that got old. That's why we went out. That's why we got a new coach. And we went out and hired the greatest coach to ever do it, because you want to be prepared for those Saturdays when you go in there. I think they've got somebody that's going to be able to do that. That message really seems to be hitting home, because it seems like these guys are practicing harder. Brent Renner said it was a professional environment. Well, yeah, that's what we were hoping for. And that's what Bill Belichick is going to bring. I think that he is going to be stressing that every single time this team takes the field for practice. And I think that really is going to show when you get to Sundays. Or Saturdays, thinking that he's still back in the NFL. But the other thing, I think, Will Hardy, that was something that I took away too. Definitely has taken on a leadership role. The other guy that I think's got a big leadership role for this team, and, we can question whether or not he's going to be a guy that's going to have success along the offensive line. I'm still one of those guys as well. The fact that one of the guys that's in the room talking or that is heading things up when they're getting ready to do the lift, the special lift event, I forget what exactly they call it. But whenever they were doing that, Will Hardy, of course, is saying that it's dedicated to Tylee Kraft, right alongside of him, talking to the guys and telling them that this is a big deal. Tylee Kraft is a big deal here at Carolina. Was Christo Kelly. That's a guy that I think right now it's become very obvious. He is a guy that is going to have a major role for this team this year. He is going to probably be the team starting center. Now that Austin Blaskey is out injured for the first 4 weeks, I don't see any way possible that he is not the team starting center and should be for the majority of the season. And he is the type of leader that Carolina needs. And for him to be an outsider, for him to be a guy that's coming up from the FCS ranks and to already feel like he needs to be that type of leader for this team, I think that's amazing. That is something that should be, that should make Tar Heel fans very happy and make them feel very comfortable that this season could go the way that they're hoping. Because when you've got a leadership force like that, you feel pretty good. The other thing I like was Thaddeus Dixon. You can see how confident he is. And there's a difference between being confident and being cocky. I think he's a guy that is very confident. He is incredibly talented. And we'll talk more about him when we talk about the defensive backs later this week. But I think he really is what Carolina needs, because in that room, you talk about a lack of confidence on a team. Carolina in general, especially defensively, had a lack of confidence under Mac Brown. They knew that the first time things went wrong, it was going to crash and burn. The game I always go back to is that Holiday Bowl game against Oregon. They were defensively, they had a really good game going against Bo Nix and that offense. Bucky Irving really didn't do a whole lot for Oregon in that game. All of a sudden, they let one thing happen, a big completion down the field, and it completely changed the game. Carolina literally could not stop anything after that point. This is going to be hopefully a different mindset. And with a guy like Thaddeus Dixon, you know that if he gets beat on a play, he's going to put it behind him. He's going to get on to the next play. But if he makes a play, he's going to let you know about it because he is just that confident in himself. So I think this is going to be, a really successful defensive backfield led by him. And I thought it was really cool to see the person that he is, how confident he is in himself. But, the type of leader that Carolina really needs, a leader by example out on the field. So that's our look at the come up. We'll, of course, whenever chapter 2 comes out, because that's how they are labeling it by chapters, we will have our reaction to that. Meanwhile, as we told you, the defensive back preview, that is going to be the next thing that we are going to do here on this edition of the show. We'll have the defensive backs. We'll see if we'll tie special teams in with them. If we don't, that might be one that I just do on my own really quickly, just to get that one out of the way. The defensive backs, it could take us a little bit. There are a lot of guys in that defensive backfield room. There's a lot of guys that we like. So that'll be coming up later on this week. I don't know if we're going to do that tomorrow or a different day, but we'll let you guys know on social media what day we're going to do that so that you guys can be locked in. And once we're done with that, that's it for the position previews, guys. And then we're turning our attention to the upcoming season in full when it comes to, breakout players. We'll do that episode of the podcast. And then, we'll really be that close already where we will be getting you prepared for the game against TCU. So it is right around the corner. Believe it or not, this coming Monday will be 2 weeks from the game. Now, Carolina, of course, has to wait a little bit longer than everybody else. But, it is right around the corner, and we're going to have you prepared with everything that's going on with the on-the-field stuff. Any other news that comes out around the team, we'll have you covered on the podcast as well as over on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you guys go there and check all of that out. The best way to get all of our content is on the Twitter page at HeelToughBlog. Only thing that gets posted on that page is our content, our articles, our podcast editions. That's it. We don't post anything else. We don't even retweet anything else on that account. So make sure you go over there and give that a follow. Turn on those post notifications so that whenever we put any sort of content out, you guys know where to go and where to get it. Same thing. One thing we're really pushing here is the YouTube page. Make sure you guys go over there to our YouTube page. Subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. We're really trying to get those YouTube numbers up. So if you guys could do that, if you're someone that watches the podcast, we greatly appreciate whatever site you watch it on, but we would love for you to go over there to our YouTube page and give that, give us a view over there. And also, whenever we put up the position breakdowns and we break them down even further, where we're talking about, a specific guy or a few specific players, we would love for you to be able to watch those videos as well. If you're looking for something like tonight, for example, if you missed it, you want to go back, just hear about Andrew Simpson, you don't really care about the other guys, we'll have that breakdown for you on our YouTube page so that you guys can go back and check it out. So make sure that you do hit that subscribe button when you are over there. And same thing, if you're over on our Facebook page, just give us a like over there. We would greatly appreciate it. Not done yet. Coming back here in just a few minutes, we'll be doing the basketball side of things. We'll be talking about Luka Bogovac and him arriving to campus. So make sure that you stick around for that edition of the podcast, the Four Corners podcast, that is. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast if you are a listener to either one of these shows. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.